Now, a great many Americans have come to believe that he has, in fact, changed his party after all these years. It's one of the reasons there's so much discussion of this subject. On significant parts of the right and left, there is a sense that religion has always been and always will be a conservative force. Sold Out insists that religious faith does not lead ineluctably to conservative political conclusions. It argues, as I said, that the era of the religious right is over. This collapse, I believe, and we could get to this in the discussion, is part of a larger decline of a certain style of ideological conservatism that reached high points in 1980, 1994, and perhaps 2002, but suffered a series of decisive and, I believe, fatal setbacks during President Bush's second term. The end of the religious right does not signal a decline in evangelical Christianity. On the contrary, if a Catholic can use this word, it is the sign of a new reformation among Christians who are disentangling their great movement from a political machine. And I think this historic change will require liberals and conservatives alike to abandon their sometimes narrow views of who religious Americans are and what they believe. I insist that religion is not the enemy of reason and science, that people of faith are not blind automatons who never question themselves or their deepest beliefs. For goodness sake, if Mother Teresa could have a crisis of faith over many years, we know that an awful lot of believers do question their beliefs. At the heart of my argument is a view that religious faith, far from being inevitably on the side of the status quo, as Dom Helder-Camara would teach us, should on principle hold it to higher standards. So religious people should be wary of the ways in which political power is wielded, skeptical of how economic privileges are distributed, and they should certainly be wary of how their own traditions have been used for narrow political purposes. Throughout our history, our great religious traditions, this is especially obvious in the Christian and Jewish scriptures with which I am most familiar, have preached a message of hope for more just and decent human arrangements. If you wonder where Barack Obama got it. One of my favorite teachers, the theologian Harvey Cox, argued many years ago that the theological enterprise seeks to grasp the problem man faces in this historic present. He wrote it a long time ago, that's the sexist language, in light of the past and his future, that is, in light of faith and hope. Cox called for a church which speaks with pointed specificity to its age, which shapes its message and mission, not for its own comfort, but for the health and renewal of the world. The title of my book can be read in two ways. It speaks to the country's exhaustion, I believe it's exhausted, with a religious style in politics that was excessively dogmatic, partisan, and ideological. It was a style reflecting a spirit far too certain of itself, far too insistent on the depravity of its political adversaries. Linking the fortunes to one political party or one leader or group of leaders is always a mistake. It encourages alienation from faith itself. Where, after all, did Voltaire come from? Where do the new atheist writers come from? It does so by turning a concern for the ultimate into a prop for temporal power. It distorts great traditions by requiring its exponents to bob and weave in order to accommodate the political needs of a given moment or the requirements of a given politician. A great many people, including a great many religious people, have had enough. They've had enough for a reason embodied in the other title, sense of the title. Reducing religion to a narrow set of public issues amounts to a great sellout of our religious traditions. It is common to speak of religion as selling out to secularism or modernity or relativism. But there is a more immediate danger, I think particularly in the United States in recent years, of religion selling out to political forces that use the votes of religious people for reasons having nothing to do with a religious agenda, and often enough for causes that may contradict their values and the things they prize most. It is a great sellout of religion, as I said, to insist that it has much to say about abortion and gay marriage, but little useful to say about social justice, the environment, the death penalty, war and peace, the organization of our work lives, or our approach to providing for the old, the sick, and the desperate. My book reflects an impatience with the way in which values issues have been declined. Remember those exit polls in 2004 where voters were asked, did you vote on moral values or on Iraq or education or the economy? Now, I always ask groups whenever I bring this up, did anyone in 2004 vote on the basis of immoral values? I have been waiting for that person because I want to invite them out for a drink after the talk, but no No one has ever volunteered that. So it was a flaw in the question to begin with. But think of the fundamental flaw in that question. If you cared about the economy or social justice or the war in Iraq, you couldn't possibly be worried about moral questions. What does that mean for our take on the word moral? What does that mean for our take on what political morality is? And the idea that the religious winds are changing is one of the sold-out central themes. Now, a lot of people, I have this bold sentence that says the era of the religious right is over, and a lot of people challenge that, and so I want to just deduce a little bit of evidence, and again, we can talk about that. It's not that evangelical Christians are disappearing, but think of what's happening, and I'll just talk about evangelicals for a moment, in their movement. Take the example of Rich Cizik of the National Association of Evangelicals, who has decided, along with lots of evangelicals at the grassroots, that a concern for the environment, which evangelicals call creation care, is a central biblical value. Rich Cizik actually had a whole showdown at the board of the National Association of Evangelicals where some people on the right said, no, you can't do that. What are you doing listening to all these liberals who care about global warming? The board of the NAE, reflecting what's happening on the ground among evangelicals, voted 37-1 for Rich Cizik. I never figured out what happened to the one. I tried. And I think that's a sign of change. A figure familiar to many of you, Rick Warren from the Saddleback Church. He inspires the sin of covetousness in anyone who writes books because The Purpose-Driven Life has sold like 30 million copies. It's almost like the price of gasoline, the way that sales figure goes up, or the old McDonald's signs. Rick Warren, like Rich Cizik, is very conservative. But he also decided that if you ignored what Jesus said about the poor, you couldn't be reading the same Bible as the one that has always been the Orthodox Bible. And he is encouraged by his wife, as it happens. He's developed a great mission to help people with AIDS in Africa. Some of you may recall this story. Last year, Rick Warren invited Sam Brownback, good conservative Republican, and Barack Obama to his Saddleback Church. He got enormous grief from the right. How could you invite this pro-abortion liberal Barack Obama to your church? And Rick Warren at the time said, I am not right-wing or left-wing. I am for the whole bird. And I think what you're seeing is the rise of whole bird Christianity out there. There are a lot of people who are for the whole bird.